Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Jess Hilarious, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got some special guests joining us this morning.
That's right.
We have Kerry Washington and Delroy Lindo. Welcome.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo. Good morning to you both. Kerry, first and foremost, how are you? You still catching COVID like it's 2020?
Right?
I am. I'm back in the 2020 era. God help us. I'm doing okay. I'm getting better, one day at a time. But good. Thank you for being able to do this virtually, because I love our show and I want to be able to talk about our show and not get anybody else sick. So thank you.
That's right. Delroy, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Doing well.
Yeah.
Man, salute to you, Delroy, the legend. You've been acting for almost 50 years. I hasn't been 50.
I lose track, but somewhere around there, yeah.
What does that mean to you?
What does it mean to me? You know what? I'm really I feel fortunate that I'm still working, to be honest, man. Knock on wood, and still doing work that people seem interested in. So I feel that feels real good.
Absolutely.
And this feels good, being involved with a project like this. Isn't that right, Ms. Washington?
UnPrisoned.
I was just thinking, we're the lucky ones, that he's still working, because he is, to me, Delroy is one of our national treasures. He's like,
absolutely,
he's an OG. He's on my Mount Rushmore of acting. So that he's still doing it is so generous, really, because he could be like, I'm good. I brought my A game. Everybody knows how good I am, but he's still like invested in everything he does. He makes better because he's in it. So we're blessed that he's still working.
Yeah, and he just brings us joy, not because of his craft. Whenever we get a glimpse of that meme where he's dancing in the club in Five Bloods, that didn't look like acting to me, Delroy. It looked like he was just having a good time. I like that energy.
So you know what? That's a good example of something having caught on that I had no idea about, but it's a terrific kind of example of the work kind of reaching a broader audience. Absolutely. Because the fact that it gets onto social media like that and becomes like a thing in itself, which is an added bonus to being an actor and working. Because when we're doing that scene, I didn't think about that. I didn't think that it was going to be on social media like that. So it's good.
How many times you had to do that take?
You know what? We did it maybe twice because Spike thought about it in the moment. It was literally, we're gonna do this.
Oh.
No. Yeah, that was not scripted, right?
Wow.
He came to us and said, we were in the club. We were doing another scene in the club. He said, let's just do this. And I think we did it twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who let, before we gonna get into UnPrisoned, but before, who let you know that was going so viral and still goes so viral?
My son.
Okay.
My son. And I started getting, look at this. But I had no idea.
Now, season 2 of UnPrisoned is out now on Hulu. For people who've never seen, break down what UnPrisoned is about. Start from season 1.
Kerry, you want to take that? I mean, I'm no, only because I'm happy to talk about it, but I want Kerry to talk about it just because my involvement with this. The reason I want Kerry to talk about it is because Kerry is the one who brought me into this project. And as I said last night, I don't know if you heard this, Kerry, but her leadership, her relationship to this project, and because she has a particular relationship to the project, she has a relationship to everybody involved in the project. And she was the one who reached out to me initially to say, will you come do this? So, it sits in her heart in a way that, I want her to talk about it because she's partially responsible for getting the thing off the ground. So you take it, Ms. Washington.
Sir, I mean, one of the things I love about being a producer is that I get to be a part of work like this with people that I so admire and telling stories that I think matter. So this show is inspired by the life of a woman named Tracy McMillan, whose dad was in and out of prison her whole life. And it's really about this kind of intergenerational relationship between a dad, his daughter, and his grandson. And when the dad comes out of prison, he comes to live with them, and kind of how the three of them figure out how to coexist. So it's about what it's like to be a returning citizen, you know, when you're leaving the system and trying to re-enter into the world, but it's also about what it means to love a returning citizen and be in a family that's grappling with how we are impacted by this so-called justice system. And it's so meaningful to me because there's so many of us who have been impacted by the system, who have family members who've been incarcerated or been incarcerated ourselves. I mean, we were at a film festival last year when the show first aired, and we did 4 sit-down interviews. And 3 out of 4 of the journalists had a parent who had been incarcerated. And they were all different races, too. I mean, this story, I'm very proud. This story is very much the story of a Black family and the particular challenges and joy that we experience. But this is also an American story. Like, we are all dealing with the tragedy that is the justice system in this country and how it impacts us and for generations. But what I love, one thing I would say is that you wouldn't think, having said all that, you would think it's like a very heavy show. But part of what made me fall in love with this show is that it's a comedy. I mean, it's a dramedy, but there's a lot of like joy and love and laughter, because that's also who we are as a people. Like, we are resilient, we are survivors, and this character that Delroy plays, Edwin, is like such a beautiful example of how we may have stereotypes about who's in the system.
Or think we have stereotypes. We think we know who those people are, and we do not.
That's right.
I gotta jump in really quickly because
please.
Kerry, yes, we are a Black family, but one of the strengths of this work is that we are dealing with our humanity, and humanity transcends race. Right? And I've been thinking since Five Bloods, actually. I started articulating this in a lot of the interviews that I was doing around Five Bloods. If you think, you guys know this, one of the main problems that African descended people have had since time immemorial is the rejection of our humanity. That's right. That's the beginning, the middle, and the end of the thing right there. That we are not considered to be human. Now, with a show like this, with work like this, yes, it's a Black family, but I believe that one of the strengths of this work has to do with the fact that we're first and foremost presenting human beings who happen to be Black. And because we're investigating the foibles of of those dynamics, I think, I don't know what you think, Kerry, but I think it's transcended itself beyond this is an examination of a Black family, right? And that's one of the strengths of this work. I will tell you that last night, Kerry, at the so we had the premiere screening last night, and this has happened to me a lot in the 2 years we've been doing this. A sister came up to me and said, "Mr. Lindo, I just want to thank you for the work. My daddy was incarcerated for 10 years when I was a little girl, and the notes that you all are hitting in this work really resonate for me personally." And that's another one of the strengths of this work, as far as I'm concerned, that it has, piggybacking on what Kerry said, it touches people in personal ways. And I'm not necessarily surprised about that, but it's every time it happens, it's an affirmation of the strength and the value of what we're doing,
Well, you talk about, I was watching, you talk about breaking generational curses, right? That would seem one of the things that was most important, because you touch things of family members going to jail and how a lot of times when they come out, people feel ashamed. You talk about biracial relationships, fathers trying to get back into their daughter and do those things. So why was that all important? Because those are all topics in our community sometimes we don't necessarily talk about outside the house.
Amen. So as Kerry was speaking, and she talked about the process that is that's alive in this work of these 3 individuals, myself, my daughter, and my grandson, Kerry's son, played by Folly. We're also, and I hadn't thought about this in these terms until you said it, Kerry. We're also unpacking what it means to love. What does love look like? Right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about the intergenerational blockages to that, and how, for instance, black men, as an example, how we are socialized to believe we are supposed to be a certain way. And our your generation, we're all trying to interrupt that. And this show is at the heart of that, because we're trying to figure out, and you say it, Kerry, in the first episode of season 2, that we need to break this chain. We need to break this process of this intergenerational pathology, repeating itself over and over and over again. So there are all kinds of aspects to this work that, speak to the condition of being an African descended person and what we deal with as families, as individuals. But it's human, man. It's human.
Right. I love the.
What I loved about your question was that you said these are things that we don't necessarily talk about outside the home. And the reason we don't is because we think we're the only ones. And so we have this shame, right? We have shame that causes us to keep our secrets and not air our dirty laundry. The power of a show like this is that we get to provide people with an opportunity to see themselves reflected on a larger scale, right? So people get to be in their homes, but they know that they're not alone, because we're all dealing with trauma of some sort. We're all trying to figure out how to love our kids. We're all trying to figure out how to love our parents. We're all trying to figure out how to free ourselves, whether it's free ourselves from prison bars or free ourselves from the limitations that other people have placed on us. We're all on these journeys of
trying to figure out how to love each other, ourselves.
Yes. So we get to, with joy and humor, we get to kind of say to somebody like, here's the dirty laundry. Every family has it. We're all navigating it. If we can put it out there and talk about it more freely, we can actually free ourselves. That's the joy of the show. Is like, this family's drama is out for you all to consume and take in, feel less alone, and then we all move forward together.
And it plays out in therapy too. I was gonna say that it plays out in therapy. Like, we've been talking about in the last couple of years more and more about going to therapy, but it plays out in therapy. And one time that was something that nobody ever talked about, going therapy, getting help. So the fact that as a family y'all go together is I think is big as well.
Before we get to the therapy aspect, I want to go back to the intergenerational thing, because Kerry said something just now. We don't talk about it outside of the house because we don't talk about it inside of the house.
Amen.
And that's what I love that y'all do in the show. Y'all are having those intergenerational conversations within the house. So just talk to people about how important it is to have intergenerational conversations, to not be so segregated in the home.
Oh, man. As we're all talking this morning, and I'm listening to Kerry and I'm listening to the questions you guys are coming up with, what's occurring to me as it relates to your question and as it relates to just my own life, there's a safety. We get to examine these dynamics within the construct of this television show, right? Frankly, and partially, my answer to your question is that I get to investigate for myself as a human being on the planet how these things, how intergenerational trauma, pathology has impacted me. And I get to use the conduit of Edwin, the character that I'm playing, to investigate some things that are very personal to me. As a result of that, I come on a show like this, and we, in this case, as black men, as black woman, get to discuss these things, right? And I, honestly, sometimes I feel I can, and I've said this before, sometimes I feel I can be more articulate in my work addressing certain issues than I can as a regular human being. And that's trippy, frankly. Because when I take a half a step back and recognize that, acknowledge that, then I'm faced with the challenge of, okay, man, you did this in an acting job. Now address it for yourself outside of the process of acting.
That's right.
Right.
Well, you open up the conversation, though.
You open up the conversation. Yeah. You open up the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's powerful is that, for me, when you watch the show, if you watch it with loved ones, you have, in the same way that Delroy's saying, like, he can explore his issues through Edwin, you also, somebody watching the show can explore their issues through Paige, my character, right? Like,
all day long.
You can have a conversation with your husband about something that Paige is going through, and it gives you like space to kind of hide behind Paige's crazy, because she's a little bit neurotic and crazy. And that way it makes it easier. Like, I think when the storytelling that we're exposed to is telling the truths about all of us, then it makes everything easier to talk about, whether it's in our home or outside our home.
So hold up. No. Go ahead, Kerry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so another personal, kind of an anecdotal affirmation. I'm in the Apple store about, I don't know, 5 months ago, getting a new phone. Sister comes up to me in the Apple store and says, "Thank you for UnPrisoned." And she goes on to talk about the fact that her daddy was incarcerated. But then she says, I think I told you this, Kerry, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you did.
My auntie is exactly what Kerry Washington is doing. That's my aunt right there. Again, these personal anecdotal affirmations that we're doing, what we're doing has a particular kind of value, you know. And going back to your original question, what do I call you, man? Do I call you Charlamagne? Or I call you Charlamagne the guy? What do people call you?
Whatever you feel like, brother. You can say Charlamagne. That's fine.
Charlamagne.
Going back to your original question, I don't know that we saw all of the potential, Kerry, when you and I had that very first Zoom call, when you first kind of pitched this to me. I don't know
when I begged you to come be on this show.
I wasn't going to put you out there like that, sis, but okay. When we first had the conversation, we didn't necessarily know it would have this kind of resonance and impact, but there was one critical, and we need to include Tracy in this, right? Tracy McMillan, whose life journey has been the inspiration for this work. They said to me, both Tracy and Kerry said to me, they wanted to break the stereotypical image that people have of a formerly incarcerated cat, right? You think, oh, this cat's been in and out of prison since his daughter was a little girl. His last bid was 17 years. He did a 17-year bid. But then Tracy said to me, but if my father walked into a restaurant right now and just sat down and started to have a conversation, you would not necessarily know that he's a formerly incarcerated.
That's right.
That piqued my interest right there, because then I said, well, what kind of a cat is this? What's his personality? The charm. And when I met him, absolutely. So to what I'm getting at is the fact that from the very beginning, we were about the business of attempting to break stereotypes.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You're in your 70s.
I don't talk about that part, man.
Okay, I'm sorry, my bad.
You look good, my brother.
You look
really
great.
Good. I'm looking at you like inspiration.
But the reason I say that is my father he just turned 80. My mother's in her 70s.
God bless him.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I look at them, their way of thinking and their way of doing things is totally different from us, right?
I hear you.
So how was that with you acting? Because things evolve. So, when my mom and dad, it was like a kid's place is a kid's place. They didn't talk about things, but my kids is a lot different. So how was it for you evolving to a different way of thinking, a different way of learning and seeing the world?
Okay, so I have a son. He's just turned 23, and the joke that I tell, and Kerry and I as parents have had these kinds of conversations as parents, our relationship to our kids, right? What I always say about, for instance, my father, who did not raise me, what I took from the way that my dad did not raise me, he gave me a really good lesson in what not to do in terms of raising my son. And that's valuable. That's really valuable for me. I would say that because my son is 23 and I've been raising him for 20 plus years, my ethos, my philosophy, my way of being with my son has evolved and developed way before I started doing UnPrisoned. However, I don't know how it is for you all, but likewise, I came up in a time when little kids should be seen and not heard, right? One of the first components of, and I don't want to tell anybody how to raise their kids, of course, but communication is everything.
Everything.
Everything. We have to talk to each other. We got to talk to our kids, because frankly, as you all know, those of us who are parents, kids see everything.
They do.
Whether they articulate it to you or not, they are watching and they see everything and they know bullshit, right? So I guess lesson number one, challenge number one for me as a parent is, how can I be as, and I'm not always successful, but how can one be as authentic as one can be? And I know that's a very hackneyed and overused term, but to try to be as genuine and open with my child as I can be. And that's one of the challenges. And by extension, how do we do that with our friends? Right. How do we do that with our loved ones, man? How do we do that? And it's an ongoing process. But I got to say something. I'm really thankful for this conversation right now, right? That this, whether it be the fact that this work has helped to engender this kind of a conversation, but the fact of the matter is we're having the conversation.
That's right.
And we're having the conversation. Yes, we're having the conversation around the work, but we're having a conversation around the ideas, the dynamics that this work has produced, and what we as human beings who happen to be Black are challenged to negotiate, right? And I come back again, Kerry, that sister the young lady in the Apple store who said, that's my auntie right there. And looking at, you guys have not seen the second season, I'm assuming, right?
No.
Okay, so I looked at the episodes from the second season a few weeks ago. And I got to tip my hat to the fact, Kerry, that you do not shy away from Paige's neuroses. You don't shy away from that. You jump in. Both feet. Now you do. You jump in both feet.
I finally found a character that's as crazy as I am.
Oh, so check that out. Check that out. But you go there. You do it. And as an actor working with that, working opposite that, as an actor, as a human being, playing against that, it's admirable. And it all contributes.
You know what's interesting, Delroy? I want to tell you what's interesting for me is there's something, I think there's a little bit more of that for me in this season. And I don't think it's unrelated to actually the last time that I was here at the Breakfast Club. I don't think it's unrelated to my memoir, because there was something about me writing my book and being like as fully vulnerable in the world I could possibly be, that allowed me to understand that Paige also was ready to be vulnerable at a different level. Like this season, she's ready to be like more raw because she really wants to heal. Like so much of what this season is about, guys, is that my son is struggling. And so even though my dad and I have been like dancing around each other, trying to coexist, when his grandson, my son, starts to struggle, that's the thing that gets us in family therapy, because we're like, whatever stuff we're working out, whatever issues we have, it should stop with us. We should not be passing this on to the next generation. And the only way to do that is if we show up and like unpack it. If we wrestle with the stuff that is limiting us, that is preventing us from being who we want to be, if we can unpack that stuff, then we can prevent ourselves from passing it on to him. So, you know, I think a lot of it is like I was doing that work in between season 1 and season 2 in my own life so much that I really understand this like need that Paige has to do the work to really figure out who she is, so that she doesn't irresponsibly just pass her issues on to the next generation.
I want to ask about that, Kerry, because, you know, Paige is a therapist on the show. Clearly, she's a therapist who needs a therapist. So I want to ask you.
All of them do. Let me tell you,
right.
if your therapist doesn't have a therapist, get a new therapist.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, how do you believe therapy is going to help Paige? But in real life, would you go to a therapist who didn't have a therapist?
I think one of the things I love about this season is like some of the funniest episodes this season. I don't know if you agree, Delroy, but I think our therapy scenes are some of the funniest episodes this season.
They are.
Like last season, we had a big...
and profound.
Right? Last season, we had a big dance battle scene. This season, we have an episode where we're in family therapy, and it actually turns into a wrestling match, like a WWF wrestling match.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen it.
It's so much fun. And it really is this idea of like, we have to wrestle with it. We have to wrestle with the stuff. And I think a therapist, nobody's perfect. So to me, I always want to make sure that my therapist is in therapy, because nobody is perfect. Therapy is not about being wrong or bad or broken. It's about perspective and growth. So everybody should be, to me, if you're a therapist, you should also be bouncing your ideas off of somebody so that you are fully responsible for the time you're with your clients and you're not projecting your stuff onto your patients.
That's right.
One thing I did see that a lot of people are going to really take to it is when, I guess there's a scene where your son wants to talk to his dad. And you're like, nope, it's not going to happen. I don't like him. It's not going to happen. And I know that happens in a lot of relationships where women might not mess with their baby daddy.
That's not right, though, Kerry.
But you're like,
kids
no.
Need their father.
And he's like, I want to text my dad. And that's the wrestling match that I've seen. So talk about that a little bit and how that scene came about.
It's so again, this is like inspired by Tracy McMillan's life, but also we have this incredible room of writers, also led by Yvette Lee Bowser, who is like a comedic goddess. Like she was behind Living Single, like all the shows in the 90s that we love the most. Yvette Lee Bowser had her fingerprint on them. And so she's part of why we're able to have this incredible comedic tone in what we do. Also, Tracy's just hilarious too. But this issue of like, you know, Paige has issues around control, and she feels like her baby daddy hasn't been present in the way that she's wanted him to be. And so she has a block on their relationship, which is so ironic, right? Because she knows the issues that she deals with from her own dad being in and out of her life. And yet she's repeating that pattern with her son by preventing his dad. So I will let you know that they work through it, and we do get to meet his dad this season, which is amazing. And it's very humbling for Paige to have to, you know, be open to that. And one of the things I want to toss to you, Delroy, because this is one of the ways you see where the intergenerational village is so important, because there are ways in which Paige doesn't know how to walk her son through this journey, but her father, as another man, can walk her son through this journey with a different kind of wisdom and a different kind of presence. And so you realize why it's so important for us to be able to work on our family connections and heal our family wounds, because the more that we're able to be in community with our family, the more growth we can have.
He is, my grandson, Finn, is an extraordinary bridge between you and I on this journey.
Yeah.
And the young actor Folly, who's grown like exponentially in this work. And I met his parents last night, and I told them, and his mom started kind of, I'm going to start crying. But it's brilliant that he is there functioning as this bridge. And you know, we're sitting here and we're having this conversation, and I didn't know it would be all this. I mean, Kerry, I mean, you know, we didn't know it would resonate like this. We didn't know that it would.
It's telling a story that needs to be told in our communities.
Amen.
And it's actually a new story for our community.
It is.
Over the last few years, we've been having these conversations. So to see it in art, it's like, wow.
And we didn't know it would have this. I did not know it would have this impact necessarily. But what I did know, and this is what I tried to speak to last night, Kerry, was that there was a real there seemed to be a real commitment to we want to try to climb up this mountain. We want to try to traverse this mountain, and we want to try to do this thing. And that was and we want to try to do it like this. And I don't mean that it was kind of prepackaged, but our objectives were we want to flip the script on this thing if we can. And that was one of the things that got my attention and made me feel, okay, yeah, I'd like to be a part of this journey.
You know, so I think the irony of Miss Washington having COVID right now is that during COVID, so many of us were forced to sit down and be still for the first time in a long time. Yeah. So a lot of people had to look in that mirror, and that made a lot of people start realizing, I don't really necessarily like what I see. I need to go do some work on myself.
Yes. But I'll tell you a little secret. If you would have asked me and I was like everybody else. First of all, I got the first round of COVID, and it kicked me in my behind. I mean, it did a number on me. But if you would have said to me, in that 8 months that you were in the house with your family, how did it change you? I know it did change me, but I'd be hard pressed to articulate it. One of the things that was, and this is going to sound so weird, but one of the things that was, I didn't mind being in the house by myself.
Me neither.
I loved it. Having the whole family around you.
I loved it. Man. I loved
it. The anxiety and parental paranoia was gone. I knew where everybody at. I loved it.
I did too. And I was not aware of that. I was just in it, just doing it. And turning the TV on and watching things that you wouldn't ordinarily watch. That part, I dug that part.
Me too.
So what does that say about me?
But were you doing work before COVID? Because I was in therapy before COVID.
Oh, you were?
Oh, yeah.
No. Now,
you've always been doing work on yourself, Delroy. I think through your craft, you are a very self-aware person. I think you use the work to do a lot of the kinds of self-reflection that other people do in therapy.
I want to believe that. No, that is true. It is true because I have not had, yes, I've had therapists over the years, but my journey, a journalist asked me last night, she said something like, what's your personal relationship to therapy? Have you been in therapy? How has therapy helped you? And I looked at her and I said, next question, please. Because what that question did was it challenged me to investigate my own relationship to therapy. Now, I was not about to do that with this journalist, right? On a red carpet, right? But to your question, was I doing work before? And to what Kerry said, again, it sounds like a hackneyed cliche, but my work has saved my life. It saved my life. It saved my sanity. My work. And my work has become even more important to me because I haven't had a consistent journey with a therapist. I didn't come out of the school that said, I'm a black man, I don't need therapy. I didn't come out of that school, but I had this thing, and I still have this thing in my head. I wanted a black male therapist. I felt I wanted a black male therapist, and they're hard to find. I mean, it may not be as difficult now, but historically for myself, knowing years ago that I needed to be in therapy, when I started looking, and I was right here in New York City, living in New York, I wanted a black therapist, and I found one eventually who retired. Had he not retired, I would have stayed with him. But it's hard. It's hard to find a therapist that one really vibes with, who kind of gets it. And I felt that with all of the other dynamics, I needed a black male. I felt like I needed a black
somebody
male.
That's culturally competent.
Yes,
that you don't got to explain things to.
Certain things too. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Another theme in this show, man, I love any conversation about dealing with your inner child. So Kerry, talk about the significance of the interactions Paige has with her inner child.
That little girl is brilliant.
She's Jordan McIntosh. She's phenomenal.
She is.
And if you haven't seen the show yet, for anybody who's listening, go back and watch the first season also, because we get to meet Edwin's inner child as well. And it's one of my favorite episodes of the series. But working with Jordan is so joyous for me. When we were casting this character, Little Paige, there were actually two actresses. It came down to these two young actresses. And one of them looked more like me than Jordan. Like, she really looked like me. And we were going back and forth between, like, is it her? Is it Jordan? And the difference between what they brought to the roles, both extraordinary young actresses. But the other girl who looked more like me had this kind of sweet innocence of a child. And Jordan comes out the box swinging, right? She's like
flavor up the
bold, and
yes,
she's so spunky and bold and excited and adventurous. And what we realized in that process of casting, we had to ask ourselves, like, what is the point of Little Paige on the show? And what we wanted Little Paige to be was, we wanted her to be, that part of you that exists before society tells you that you're not enough.
Absolutely.
That part of you that is brave and bold and fearless. And it's before a teacher tells you you move too slow, or you're too loud, or you're not pretty enough, or you're not all the ways that society gets in your head. And that's what Jordan was. Jordan was that fierceness of Paige, of me, before the world told me a lie that I was not enough. And so when we hired her, it was such a gift to the show, because that's what the inner child work is, and if you never heard of it, for anybody who's listening, sometimes in therapy, you'll build a relationship with your younger self, with your inner child, because you want to go back and do the work to heal the spaces in you that adults weren't able to take care of. Because listen, the adults in our life are not perfect. I know as a mom, I'm not perfect, right? Like, we do the best we can. But part of being an adult is saying, like, okay, maybe I didn't get everything I needed as a child, but now it's my job to go back and heal myself so that I can move forward. I can't just sit around blaming my mom and dad and whatever teacher in third grade for who I am today. Like, who I am today is somebody who can take responsibility and heal myself and move forward. So the relationship with the Little Paige, with my inner child on the show, is so important, because it's part of how Paige is doing the work to grow and move forward.
What about you, Mr. Lindo?
Well said, Kerry. Well said. Well said. Okay. Everything that Kerry just said, everything that Kerry just articulated, makes me think about something that I actually suffer from, and that is hiding behind my work. Much of what you just said, you're articulating how you try to fuse who you are, where you are in your process as a human being, and how you apply all of that into your work. And specifically UnPrisoned, but I would say more broadly just who you are on the planet, and that UnPrisoned is informing that. It's not the other way around, if that makes sense. For me, and you mentioned that little boy, one episode, we had him, that young man, as my inner child in one episode in season 1. That scene, Kerry, where he came and held my hand. And the beautiful thing about kids, so often they're just being
kids.
They're just being kids. They're just being human beings. And there was this profound, there was this profound, he came and held openness and just there-ness. And that connected me with who I might have been as a child. And it was really strong scene for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
To your question, my response to your question is, I am not sure. Honestly, I'm really not sure what my relationship is to in the work. One does one's job. The result of one doing one's job, you then share that with audiences, and it lands however it lands. In a job like this, and various other jobs that I've done that have meant something to people, I do not, unless I'm asked by a journalist, tell me about X, tell me about Y. I don't deconstruct how or why, but I'm kind of compelled to deconstruct when I'm asked certain questions, when I'm engaging in certain conversations. So when you say to me, what about you, Mr. Lindo? My first response is, I don't know. I don't know. And on some level, that's a scary place to be, but it affirms that throughout all of my foibles, all of my insecurities, all of my neuroses as a human being, something in the work centrally has some value to my fellow human beings, and that's why one wants to be an actor in the first place.
Is it because the character Edwin is forcing Delroy Lindo to have to deal with some things that Delroy Lindo's never dealt with? Because I was going to ask, like, even with the inner child thing, you know, you being a elder, does your inner child ever get the healing they deserve? And because they say when you
great question,
when you get to your age now, it's like you go back to being a child.
No, great question. And I would say that I'm navigating that. I don't know if it's my inner child. I guess it is my inner child. I'm navigating that as we speak, partially through the work, but I'm also writing a memoir right now. And Kerry and I have talked about this somewhat, but in engaging in that process and engaging in stuff that happened to me when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
First, how does one understand that? How does one get to a place of understanding with that stuff? And I'm unpacking all of that right now. So I would say that I know more now than I knew 4 or 5 years ago. I know more now than I did 10 years ago, for sure. Your question, how is that for you, Mr. Lindo? It's an unfolding and evolving process as we speak, because.
But even that, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, Kerry.
Even that, as I sit here watching you as one of our greatest, as one of our wisest, as one of our best, for you to have the courage to sit at a table and say, I don't know, I'm in process, I'm unpacking, I'm unfolding, that gives so many of us permission to be in process. Right. And to me, that's so much of what we need, is just the permission to not have to like walk out the door and be perfect and have all the answers, but to say, like, it's okay that I have days where I'm not sure. It's okay that I have days when I need help. And I think that's one of the things that I love about our show, is that we're so in process. We are a family that is so in process, but there's so much joy. Right. Like, we're not pulling our guts out to suffer. We're doing the work because you get to see all through the season, every time we do the work, on the other side is more love, is more joy, is more acceptance, more belonging.
Right. Even when the love is flawed. Even when the love is flawed, right?
Love is flawed.
It is flawed all day long, right? And we're what's this? We're in the mud, man, and we're trying to see it and mold it and all of that, and that's profoundly human. You said something. It's profoundly human. You said something that's connected to what we're discussing right now. You said, I'm going on Stephen Colbert tonight. Did you say that?
Yeah.
Given the events of the last, what day is this? Tuesday, Wednesday?
About 4 days, 5 days.
It's going to be Thursday when it is.
Okay, all right. So given the events of since last Friday, right, and Saturday and Sunday, and you're going into a sphere where I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but
we are, because it's live after the convention tonight.
Okay, yeah. And I'm wondering, and this speaks to how we connect with ourselves and how we communicate in the world. How much realness do you bring to that?
All of it, because this is a moment that's way bigger than us right now.
It's way bigger than us.
Way bigger than us, and you know
I'm scared right now,
yeah,
y'all.
We're at a very pivotal point in our society right now.
But it's more pivotal than how pivotal it was last week.
Yes,
of course.
Yes, of
course. It's sharper now.
Absolutely.
The way this has come down in the last 4 or 5 days.
Absolutely.
It's scary.
Oh, it's terrifying.
On top of what the Supreme Court is doing, what I don't even think is a legitimate court anymore.
No.
On top of
Absolutely.
Project 2025 on the way, it's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot. And what we've been talking about in this conversation has to do with a certain kind of truth that we as actors are trying to get to. Truth for ourselves as human beings, truth for ourselves as creative workers, and we're trying to bring all of that together, and we're putting it out there, and now another dimension of having messed around with that truth is now dealing with how that truth has impacted our our audiences.
Which is crazy is Kerry, a lot of this seems like scandal. A lot of it seems like we've seen it before on your show. Like, can you talk about that? How this seems like it's reliving again?
Yeah, there was a whole episode of Scandal that this happened.
Yes,
art imitating life.
Yes,
because people were saying that people were saying it's staged, but we know it's not staged. But it was an episode of Scandal where he did stage it. Yeah,
yeah. I think one of the things that I want us to be talking about more is that too many of us are not participating in the process, are thinking that it's okay to not vote, are feeling like there's no point in participating.
But it's set up like that, Kerry. The process is set up like that.
I know, but let me just say,
please.
What concerns me is that so much of it stems from this belief that we have internalized that we don't matter. And that's part of why this work that we do matters to me, is because we tell these stories so that people see themselves, so that they know that they matter. And I want people to participate in our democratic process because I want you to know that you matter. Like, this word democracy is getting thrown around. What I want to remind people is that what it means is a government for the people, by the people. Now, we don't do that perfectly in this country. I know that. We all know that. But we don't fix it by stepping out of the process. And I know that that's hard because life is very hard for a lot of us right now.
It's excruciating.
And we feel like we want to step out of the process because the process isn't made for us, and the process isn't working for us, and the process doesn't include us. We have to force ourselves into the process because the alternative is not a government by the people, for the people, but an autocrat, which means like a president who does whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants.
And no accountability.
And they're not being coy about it. Like, they have a very clear point by point, this Project 25, it will have a catastrophic impact on education, on healthcare, on the economy. And they're not being shy about it. They are telling us that they want to change the government so that it is no longer a government by the people, for the people, that it doesn't even have that dream, that it's going to be a government for the president and his friends. And we are not his friends.
I'm wondering if, you know, the way the Supreme Court is set up, because as I said, they're not even a legitimate institution anymore. I'm wondering right now, do we even have a healthy enough democracy to have a free and fair election in November?
Okay, so
that's
totally legitimate
it's a
question.
very legitimate.
They're telling us we got to
You
go.
know, we got to wrap there. We
Okay,
wrap
but
now.
listen, one thing, Kerry, for all of us, because this is it's beyond critically important. It's existential. It's existential. I don't think that the people who are not participating are necessarily doing it consciously. They
I
have
agree.
internalized. They've internalized this narrative that says, as you said, you don't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't count. It doesn't matter. And you internalize that, and then it becomes WTF.
That's right. That's right.
But
that's
I
what
will
we have
say,
to. That's what we have to address.
When you say, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what has to be addressed on. That's what has to be addressed on some level. The process in which folk have internalized just what you said, it doesn't matter. How do we unpack that? How do we deconstruct that and say, yeah, it matters? And how do we articulate that in a way that turns them on, flips a switch for them?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's what
I don't
we're
know,
facing.
but I do know that all the concerns we have will not be fixed by stepping out of the process.
Amen.
By deciding
Amen.
that there's nothing we can do, that will not
For sure.
that will not move us toward a solution. I don't know what each person wants to do, but there's so much that we can do right now. We can check our own voter registration. We can reach out to 5 friends who we know aren't planning to vote and beg them, try to help them to understand, because the best person to communicate somebody to the importance of voting is somebody's friend or family member, not a celebrity, not a politician, not anybody.
Amen. Right.
We can all support grassroots organizations. There are grassroots organizations all over the country who are doing the heavy work of democracy building. We can support those organizations. We can focus on local races. We can volunteer. We can make phone calls. We can, if we have the money to donate, we can do it. There is so much that we can do. And I find that when I am feeling hopeless and afraid, the more that I click into community and try to do something, the better I feel. Amen. So even if it's just like part of your own mental health strategy, because I believe that participating in politics is part of how I exercise self-care and self-love. Like I express my love for my community by showing up in my democratic process because I know that it matters.
I just want y'all to know this is the Black Dinner Table. Yeah. When you think about all the issues we covered in a matter of 40 minutes.
Therapy, biracial, coming from jail, everything.
Oh my God.
We appreciate you guys for joining us so much. We need you guys. We need you guys back, and especially individually, so we can talk about both of your careers.
It's
and
the
all
30-year anniversary of Crooklyn.
We got to discuss Romeo Must Die.
Hold on, I know y'all got to go. I do have to ask the Romeo Must Die question because Mr. Lindo, you worked with Aaliyah and DMX. You played Aaliyah's father. Does it make you appreciate life more because you're still here at 71 and those two beautiful individuals have passed on?
Yes, 1,000 times, yes. And that I didn't know DMX as well because we didn't work together. But that young lady was such a beautiful spirit, man. And I don't know, she had this, I didn't know who she was before we did the film. Extraordinarily beautiful spirit. She was like a sponge. She just wanted to learn. She wanted to move herself forward in terms of whatever her public, what her image was. The young lady that I knew, that I interacted with, was a profoundly beautiful spirit. You know, it broke my heart when we lost her, man.
You remember where you were when you heard the news?
I know exactly where I was. I was in the ER with my son. Wow. I was in the emergency room with my son. My son had developed this breathing thing, and we took him to the hospital. He was being seen by a doctor, and I stepped outside. I stepped outside to the parking lot, and I started getting all these texts. So sorry to hear, so sorry to hear. And I said, what? And then a friend of mine said, oh my God, we lost Aaliyah. And I screamed out. And I didn't know I'd screamed out. There were 2 sisters in the parking lot, and they said, sir, are you all right? And that's where I was. I was in the Oakland Children's Hospital in the parking lot when I found out about Aaliyah.
Wow.
So to your question, man, and one doesn't always think about these things in these kinds of terms. I'm so fortunate to still be here, but man, yeah.
Wow. And
then DMX, we didn't have any scenes together. I was walking down Canal Street. I was walking on Canal and Houston Street, and this car pulls up, a big black SUV, and the window rolls down. And it's DMX. Yo, 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 yo. I said, oh, what's I said, man, keep doing what you're doing, man. I said, bet. That was it. But the respect, the connection, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the fact that they're no longer here, and I'm living, I'm being a parent, I'm working, I'm having important communications with important people. And when I say important, I'm talking about people who are culturally plugged in and committed to moving our culture forward. And it's not just this cultural thing. It's the fact that we happen to be human beings, African descended human beings, and we're trying to move this thing forward for all of us. And I gotta say this, it ain't just about black people. It's about the condition of being a human being on the planet, of what we contribute, what we continue to contribute, what we contributed historically, and the fact that all the stuff we bring to the table, right, in this process of living, that constantly gets downplayed and undervalued. And it's our jobs, going back to what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, to interrupt that process and say, we're here, we're important, this is what we do, and y'all have to listen to us. And it's critical to tell those stories to our children, because they will then take it that step further.
All right, well, there you have it.
Thank
Season
you.
2
Thank
of
you, Ms.
UnPrisoned
Washington. Thank you, Ms.
is out
Lindo.
now.
God bless y'all.
We thank you for joining us. Kerry Washington, Delroy, Lindo.
God
thank
bless.
you so much. Feel better,
Thank you,
Kerry.
guys.
Feel better.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.